My name is Dr. Ngozi Akinro, and we are so excited to be here today on this episode of um, Threats. And I am joined today with my friend, Elise Hu. Elise, so glad to have you here. How are you today?
I'm great. And the both of us have so much to talk about because we're talking about the evolution of beauty perceptions across cultures. My work is focused on Korea and Northeast Asia and the rise of Korean beauty standards just across the globe these days as a result of Korea's big cultural footprint across the globe. Talk a little bit about your work, Ngozi.
Of course, of course. And it's so exciting to be talking to you today, Elise, with your work on Korean beauty. My work, my research has actually centered on beauty and globalization of beauty in the African continent.
I'm really curious what made you interested in researching beauty perceptions in Africa in the first place, and also any common trends that you have found, because I bet that they're going to be in conversation with some of the things that I found in my region.
I bet there will be similarities in some of the findings that we have. What actually attracted me or got me into studying beauty? I would say my interest, I kind of picked interest since from a really young age, right? Growing up in Nigeria and, seeing or being kind of like introduced to different ideas of what beauty is. Seeing people wanting to change their skin color, in how people make their hair, or in how people will the kind of the clothes that we wear, all of that, right? Kind of like influenced and shaped my idea of what beauty is. What got you into research work in this area, or your work on Korean culture and Korean beauty standards?
Yeah, questions about feminism and womanhood and what it means to kind of have to perform our roles as women are intricately tied with beauty, I think, just because so many of us as little girls who looked into mirrors did feel or did kind of have that question or insecurity about whether we measured up. And so I'm so glad that we can kind of have an investigative or more rigorously research framework around some of these very intimate issues of identity that are tied into beauty. And when I pulled back the lens and began to examine Asian beauty and Asian beauty norms, what I found again and again, what came up sort of post-capitalism was that beauty or performances of beauty really became tied into issues of class and how to appear more aristocratic or what the rich people were doing. Or whoever was rich, it was sort of like chasing higher status. But pre-capitalism, which I think that we want to kind of talk about many, many millennia ago, so many of the ways that we adorned ourselves, whether it was males or females, men would wear eyeliner in a lot of different parts of the world in order to be more attractive to women. So it was really about, being sexually attractive, in order to reproduce and find a mate. But beyond that, what happened next? And so what about you? What did you find?
So, it's interesting that you talked about, how some of these, pre-capitalist era, right? And talking about, let's say, eras like the feudal system, or even in the Baroque era, and all of that, right? And the way beauty is defined and shaped. Now, so somehow in my mind, when I think about beauty, right, whether by gender, class plays a very, very dominant role,
Right.
right? And even pre-colonial, pre-capitalist era, whether you're talking about the serfs, the lords, right? You'd see people adorned in their very beautiful regalias, and you had to look a certain way. Class, money, hierarchy, the ruling class, right, were actually the ones that were defined as beautiful. But of course, right, when you think about, say, like in the Baroque era, right, how beauty was defined, you would see talking about, let's say, kabuki theater and the rest of it, you would see a voluptuous woman
Mm-hmm.
that is, presented as beautiful across different African countries, where the way that we will define beauty is in so many ways shaped by Eurocentric standards, right? So I'd like to hear what is it like in the Asian culture, right? Um, Pre-capitalism.
Sure. So during dynastic periods, I will speak of the Chosun dynasty, which was the longest lasting Korean dynasty and takes us actually into, gosh, the late 1800s. And during that time, a real focus, it's a pretty Confucian based ideals.
Ideals.
And during that time, Confucianism really governed this filial piety, right? A respect to the elders. And so men would wear their hair long. Women would also grow out their hair. You wouldn't cut your nails because it was understood as disrespectful to your ancestors if you were to
Interesting.
change some of your God-given gifts, like your hair and your nails. And so you certainly would never put on makeup, for example, because that would be covering up this natural skin of yours. And everything that was natural was really perceived as desirable. Now we're in this kind of neo-Confucian, fast forward to this hyper-capitalist, hyper-consumerist time. And it's all about sort of changing what you've got in order to fit whatever works best on the market. So what has been introduced these days as a result of packaging and selling and for the market is a certain kind of sameness, a real sameness that erases difference.
It's interesting that you talk about plastic surgery and scarification and all of that, right? Because when you talk about beauty standards and um, scars are part
Yes.
of our culture, you'd see depending on, so I'll talk about say people from some parts of Western Nigeria. They would have really the Yorubas, for example, and even the Fulanis, they would have scars on their face. I remember my mom before she passed, of course. My mom had scars on her face, and those scars were beautification. They were
Wow.
markers of beauty. You would have markings on your face, you would have on your hands and different parts of your body, and those were marks of beauty. The general saying there is beauty in diversity, right? Your looks. I will not, I don't think I'll ever have thin, straight hair like a European or a white woman, right?
Sure.
I am different in the way that my hair is. My hair is natural, right? You talked about naturalness, and those were celebrated because in what the 1600s, right, 1500s, you would find people who would use makeup out of the naturalness of the earth, right? You'd create makeup from the earth, and it's beautiful. You walk around with your natural self without makeup, and you consider yourself beautiful, right, with your natural hair. And over time it became a situation where you have to change your natural hair because it doesn't fall down your back. It needs to look a certain way. It needs to be straight and thin. And of course, different kinds of health hazard comes with that. But it's interesting that you did mention about beauty, not just the outward, right? Clothing, you can take those off, right? But you sometimes you do permanent damage to your hair. Um,
Your skin.
Internally, your skin. And what I think of about most is even the way that you think. If you do not believe, first of all, that you're beautiful the way you look just because of a pre-packaged or sold definition of beauty, then I think that is fundamentally an issue.
It's something that I think is so important to bring up because, especially in this hyper consumerist time that we live in, the beauty industry, which seems to be a recession proof industry, it operates on this idea that we are flawed, that you have flaws, that I have flaws, and that you can spend money to fix those flaws. So ultimately, I wrote a book about Korean beauty called Flawless in order to sort of emphasize this idea that it is erasing difference, that ultimately, if we do kind of follow the AI driven and sort of consumerist beauty, big factory industry standards these days, what it seeks to do is erase all the perceptions of flaws, and those perceived flaws are actually what makes us different from one another. It's what celebrates kind of diversity, which is natural to the human condition. And more, you're having lower classes trying to chase the middle class, and the middle class chasing the upper class, and the upper classes are spending an enormous amount of money in order to afford the changes that will get rid of their freckles. Which leads me to this question about whether there are resistances that we're seeing, or is there kind of a larger resistance that we're seeing in this moment because there is such an influence on beauty today and surface level beauty?
That,
Are
that
there
that's
promising corners?
yeah, that's interesting, right? Thinking about resistance, and how people have actually chosen to express themselves in how they see and define beauty. I think overall, right? Um, as a Nigerian woman, right, across board, from you see Black women who are wanting to own their own skin. And you go online on social media, you see ladies who would wear their natural hair and, style it the way that they want because they feel like they are beautiful in their own skin. You see beautiful dark-skinned women who will not do something to their skin because they want to keep it the way it is. They're not trying to look light or look white in any way, right? So I think I don't know that the data is there yet to show that, there is dominance in that area of wanting to live in your own skin,
Right.
that it's dominant, right? I don't know that we have that dominant data at this time, but I feel like it's actually slowly, there is that change from wanting to change how you look to owning who you are, right? And owning your identity, basically how you look naturally, and expressing that as the standard of beauty.
My research, I found that there's basically four global beauty pillars. And even though there are localized differences across regions, so you might have to be way thinner in Korea than the US, for example, to be considered thin. Even though there are localized differences, the four global beauty pillars are thinness, smoothness, firmness, and youth. And this notion of youth, that we're all sort of frozen somewhere between the ages of 18 and 35, has been a really animating feature of so many of the products and procedures that are sold to women and increasingly men today.
Yes, yes. I'm curious. I'm curious about how you think the ideas of beauty are actually packaged and how it's actually distributed
Mhm.
globally, and
More and
how
more,
that
it's
has
virtual
actually,
technology. Yeah, I think
yeah.
the answer to that is virtual technology. I think virtual technology is arguably the biggest influence on beauty standards today. So there's this notion of Instagram face. I don't know if you've
Uh-huh.
read about this, that
Yes.
it's like a melange of various standards. So, it's maybe having a bigger butt from the global south and a higher nose from Northern Europeans, and then like long luxurious hair from Asia, let's say, or glowy skin from Asia, whatever it is. And then it's these perfect bodies that are formed in beauty filters. So it's not even real, right? And yet women and girls are learning to chase these.
Mhm.
And so they are inhuman. It's kind of an inhuman gaze. It's a technological gaze, I would call it, right? It's technological or artificial gaze, and these inhuman gazes that don't that then lead us to police ourselves.
I continue to think again, globalization, I think, plays a huge factor there. And sometimes some people would say that's the new form of colonization, right? We think that it's a global world, but then we still negotiate with these issues of superiority and inferiority, where some cultures are presented as more superior than others, right? But of course, wait, like I tell myself, we have to tell our own stories across the globe. Even when we look at Miss World or Miss Universe, thinking about going all the way back to 2001 when we had a Nigerian lady who won um, Miss World, Agbani Darego, and it did change the course of how you get to look at a black woman, right? But of course, she had her own features that was different from what a normal definition of what a beautiful person would look like. So of course, what our kids are exposed to, I think, is important in how the narrative is being passed down over and
Absolutely.
over again. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such an important point. And in talking about kind of the inputs that the kids are getting, you're also pointing to a resistance, pointing to a solution, right? Like one way to really address the increasing pressures of out of reach beauty ideals and beauty ideals that nod toward a certain sameness that none of us are going to be able to reach is to have more representation, to really
exactly.
see a lot more different bodies, a lot more different faces, a lot more different looks and abilities, people able-bodied, people with disabilities, all across the spectrum, and expose our kids to that and let them see art and let them see,
Yeah.
see beyond these perfect avatars that are seen on screens. And I am sort of heartened in sort of challenging this Western centric or Western dominant ideals of beauty that we have seen, for example, the cultural rise of K-pop,
Hmm.
um, and the global transmission of Asian beauty standards that has come as a result of K-pop, K-drama, K-film. Except when you do peel back the curtain on that and really kind of expose kids again and again to those images, yes, you're seeing more Asian beauties, but what do those Asian beauties look like? And they often have a certain ideals of smoothness and youth and thinness that doesn't get very diverse. And so, yes, there's such paradoxes to beauty. Where it is empowering, it can also be incredibly dispiriting and extractive. Where there is a lot to celebrate about kind of the nurturing of beauty workers and touch and what it feels like to sort of be nurtured and care for ourselves. It can also, on the flip side, come at a lot of labor, aesthetic labor, and come at the expense of kind of developing our true selves. And
Yeah.
so there's so much that we've covered. We've really run the gamut. And we could probably talk about this for another hour to come. But just to close out, I'd love, Ngozi, just for you to kind of wrap up what you want audiences to kind of leave thinking about and just to be mindful of going forward, with regard to this evolution that we've seen of beauty perceptions across cultures.
So when we talk about beauty perceptions across cultures, I what I want to leave the audience with is the need for us to celebrate our differences and our the idea that we are not flawless,
Yeah,
right? That we need to celebrate that, and that's what makes us unique as individuals. And of course, the need for representation across board. And
absolutely.
I think that's where the Nigerian film industry, popularly known as Nollywood, does come in the kind of content that is created. The need for content, and by the way, Nollywood is the second largest producers of movies in the world. Um, after Hollywood and
Yeah.
Bollywood around the same era, right? So you think about the kind of content that is created, the need for representation to ensure that the diverse array of beauty, right, of individuals in their own natural elements are actually presented for the world to see. Again, when we talk about global export, whether it's going all the way to different Western countries, different continents, Asia, um, North America, South America, wherever, right, that they're able to see these things, learn, and understand that there is just not one form of beauty. Although over time we've been taught to believe that what beauty is to look slim, light skin, blue eye, long hair, and all of that. But that's not all that there is when we talk about beauty. Is that in our difference, there is actually true beauty in
And
each of
that
us.
really celebrating difference,
Yeah.
celebrating the diversity that's inherent in the human experience. I 100% echo that. And what I would say, just to dovetail to that, is that something that would have been really useful for me to hear more when I was young, and maybe for you too, is to remember that our physical beauty has no bearing on our worthiness, that our
Exactly.
worthiness is in ourselves and in our magic and our charisma and our knowledge and our strength, and all of that can't necessarily be seen by our containers on the outside. So I've been so pleased and enriched by this conversation. Ngozi, thank you for the time, thank you for this discourse, and thank you to Threads for giving us this opportunity to chat.
Thank you, Elise. It's really great to talk to you and learn more about Korean beauty. And thank you, Threads, for this opportunity.